the elite from the 1970s and 1980s, even the 60s and 70s, really wanted to do good. But then they all went to business school. Everything became...
I've always said business school is the root of all evil. Congressman Michael McCall from Texas, of course. Since 2005, he has been a congressman. He was at the Davos, and he took a picture of 4 Asians. It said the Chinese delegation walked out of the speech by the Ukrainian president. And use this as an example of how terrible China really is.
But actually, it didn't happen.
No, he identified them as Chinese.
Yeah.
They were clearly Vietnamese. All right, they were the top-level delegation from Vietnam. Right. Here's a guy who went to Harvard Kennedy School. It is inconceivable to me that our intelligentsia, right, the elites who are leading the country, make such a simple racist mistake. Does that indicate that there's a bias against China?
There has been, I think, even thinking back to the days when I was in college, when the expressions of gooks, chinks, and
slant eyes,
that's right. When all of that was flying about, I think it's against Asians in general, and now there is an additional element of political attack against China. It's not just racial anymore. So,
I mean, how is it that a nation like the United States, there's the history and the reality and the rhetoric were a little bit different, but there was a time during JFK's time, it was about ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Sure.
There was this real sense that we can do better than
this. That's right.
And that attracted a lot of people. People poured in.
Myself included.
Yeah. People poured in. It was aspirational.
Yeah.
You're talking about things that really had.
That's gone. Now, what they try to attract.
But why is it gone? I mean, people, you and I, we lived through this. I say it's gone because we just went realpolitik. We gave in to our fears. We gave in to people who crave power and will try to get it by fanning your fears, by making you afraid and telling you that they have the answer, and the answer is always the other. There's an enemy out there that is taking away our life.
That's absolutely the case in Europe. You have to create the enemy. And in Asia, you create the enemy, and that's China. But I think there is another very important aspect, is the elite from the 1970s and 1980s, even the 60s and 70s, really wanted to do good. But then they all went to business school. Everything became...
I've always said business school is the root of all evil.
A good thing we went to law school.
Well, that's not much better, right, to say. They've worked together.
That's right. But it's the same thing in Europe and the UK as well. The elite went into finance because it was so much easier to amass a lot of fortune by doing very little, or doing non-creative hard work, such as really physical labor. You leave that to the poor Chinese.
I mean, China went through that for a period. I mean, before the 2008 and 9 financial crisis, we've both been investment bankers. I remember people, I want to get my son or my daughter into Goldman Sachs.
That's right.
And I'd say, why? I said, I don't think you understand what happens at Goldman Sachs. For the first 4 or 5 years, you're 16-hour days, and creating pitch books and things like this. But they really thought there was magic. And then after 8, 9, I think there was a global.
As the Chinese said to the Americans, financial crisis. You mean teachers make mistakes too?
But that falls on deaf ears. There's a lot of people who just, the people who lost their houses, their pensions, a lot of them went on the road. They started living in old campers and things like that. But when they saw a few years later, the same people who had taken their money were now getting $10 million bonuses. Do you think that takes a sense? Is this why Donald Trump kind of...
I think that's the social disorder, one of the like the Take Down Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street time. There are more people who are beginning to recognize that the country is being run by a bunch of financiers. Oh, actually by two groups of people. One is a group of financiers. Two is the military-industrial complex.
They're manufacturers.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Like the NRA. They're simply trying to provide jobs to people. But let's end on a positive note. I think that what's necessary for change in the United States, for the U.S. to regain its credibility, is to act on how it speaks. I mean, to lead by example. And I think that if the U.S. did that, it could reclaim a lot. It's not simply leading by example. It's also understanding the world is changing and has changed irrevocably. Yes. China's success over 40 years cannot be, kind of pushed aside as a blip. It's just something that happened. Don't worry, it'll go away tomorrow. Well, that story's been there for a long time. So acceptance that the world is changing. Second, lead by example, not by hypocrisy.
Yeah.
What's your?
I think we have to look at this historically. You have periods in which, for example, colonialism had to make way for something else because countries were fighting for independence.
Well, it was wrong too. That little small thing, morally. I mean, I don't know how anyone justifies it.
And then you had a period of imperial powers, imperialism, in which it wasn't pure colonialism, but it was political domination over countries, over administrations, over governments, and so on. And this on both camps, US and USSR. And that period has phased away. But I think now we've faced a period in which the global transition is from one dominant force, namely the US, into a world in which everybody wants to have better lives and will not accept that dominance and that exploitation and that being pushed around anymore.
But you'll have to admit, it's not going to be an easier world.
Oh, no.
Getting all of these different voices together is going to be tough. But doesn't that depend on things like a strong United Nations, a strong WTO, a strong WHO, unifying entities that everyone supports, bringing things together?
Well, yes. And possibly the formation of new regional or other type of groupings. For example, the BRICS is now talking about expanding its membership or strengthening of the G20. G20 was formed to address the financial crisis of 2008. And now it's being politicized. US is using it as a weapon against Russia. And so I think more global organizations, all of this is important. But I think new forms of collaboration, new forms of countries getting together to address common issues in an equal way would be also very helpful.
All right. Well, time flies.
Time flies.
We've spoken softly, but you've spoken eloquently. I've just asked the questions.
No.
Anyway, we're bringing this to a close.
It's not a softly spoken question.
And we appreciate you coming, and we will be back to you again with future episodes of Speak Softly. I'm Einar Tangen, and this is
Charles Liu.
Thank you.
Thank you.